Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming, and thanks to the family for inviting us. We appreciate it. Really looking forward also to the talk of Scott. So tonight I will be talking about the power of design, meaning what design can do for your company, but also for your users. So design is a key factor in the success of any company, not just startups. And most importantly, there are many reasons why that is true. And I will focus tonight only on 4, which have very much to do with users. And I will try to be a bit extensive and also show you some examples so you can understand a bit better. So the 4 reasons why are this. So the first one is higher user retention. What does it mean? It means the engagement of your users with your product on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. So how many times are going to get back to your product? Then higher user engagement, which means how much time they're going to spend in your product, how many data points they're going to record in your product if you are developing a tracker, for example. Faster and cheaper delivery for products. So design can help you very much with fastening the cycles to deliver your product. And also higher sales. So it can help you monetize quicker. It can help you, for example, with subscriptions, or also to get acquired later on in the process if it's something that you desire. So design is often associated mainly with the actual packaging of things, so the visual side of things. So a brand, a website, illustrations. And that's very important to get the attention of users, but there is also much more. Design is mostly concerned with the actual outcomes of things, not just the visual aesthetics of things. And the most impact that design can actually do is when design is used to do qualitative research. And I will explain a little bit why. So when we talk about users instead of people, what we are missing, it's some components, some human factors to the equation. And we need to remember that the people that are using your products are more than just users. They have cognitive patterns and they have emotions and thoughts when they are using your product. So what we're really doing when we are translating a person into a user is we are segmenting a person and translating what a person is into what a person actually does when using your product. And so while talking about users is very interesting for a quantitative data standpoint, because if we translate users into metrics, we can actually measure what users do and develop better products. At the same time, we need to take into account the emotions of people and also their needs. And that leads us a bit to what I define the golden equation for good products, for engaging products. We need to factor into the equation not just the physical interactions that people have with the product, but also their cognitive patterns and their emotions. And that leads most often than not to engaging products and thus successful companies. The first use case I would like to talk about is Clue. Sorry. How many of you are familiar with Clue? So half. So for the other people that don't know, Clue is a female tracker for the cycle across Android and iOS. What does it mean? It means that it helps women understand their cycle a bit better. So their period, their fertile window, and their ovulation date, and things like that. And at Clue, shout out to Mike, by the way, at Clue, we used to do a lot of qualitative research in many different ways, and that helped us develop a stronger brand and a connection with our users. The first example that I would like to talk about is the onboarding feature situation. So we had some drop-off in the onboarding in average with other products, which was about like 85%. And we needed to solve that problem. And the way we did that was through intensive testing, especially early on in the process with lo-fi prototypes. And that took us more or less 2 months, and then another month for actually delivering the feature. So as I was saying, like, we spent a lot of time early on doing whiteboards, sketches, and also prototypes with sticky notes. and put them on the wall. And we called beta testers to come into the office to actually test that on the wall, even before we started designing things. And that saves us a lot of time and a lot of money. And also resulted into this. So this is the final version of the onboarding, which is pretty simple, as you can see. It's very visual, and there are many things going on. So the main focus here was to actually ask people a simple question to get to have a higher chance to get an actual answer. So what we did was asking a yes or no question. And then most people, after 2 steps, they got used to this pattern of interaction and answered all the questions, basically. Another component that was very successful was that after every question, no matter the answer, we gave people some kind of feedback, some kind of insight based on science. The results were this. So 9 out of 10 people went through the onboarding, before only 1 on 9, or 1 on 10, and the onboarding retention went up of 80%. The other example I would like to focus on is active users and data points. Is there anyone here that develops or designs a tracker? No data entry? Okay. Okay, for trackers, active users and data points are very important, obviously. And you can never get enough. So you need people to be in your product and to track as much as possible so that you can understand and learn from them and give them better predictions. And what we did was using customer support as a tool to design. So here on the left, you have the first version of the tracking screen, and on the right, you have the latest version of the tracking screen. You can see that the first version is actually simpler than the last one, and there are many reasons for that. So we had on the left, the top circles are the categories, so what people can actually track. And then for each category, there are selections, so the square. And in the beginnings, we only had 8 categories, so we didn't have much to choose from for users. So it was pretty simple, the design. But then later on, we decided that we wanted to introduce way more categories. And this made it so that it was pretty complex. We had over 100 selections for people to choose from, right? So as you can see, you can tap on Peel, and then you have 4 different selections for one category. Same was there, but in the end, we had 100 selections. So we needed to find out some ways to actually make it simpler to use. And what we did was to paginate the page, so have only 3 selections, 3 categories on top, and then still the 4 selections, which was working very much. And then what we used qualitative research with, so what we used customer support emails, was to understand that people were pretty mad about the fact that every time they needed to track one thing for multiple dates, they will have to go back from the tracking, go into the calendar, and then change the date, go back into the tracking and track. So just by reading simple emails, we understood that that was a problem, and we solved it with an inline calendar on top. So now people can track, for example, Peel for multiple days, and that increased the data points. So this was the results. So 10% increase in monthly active users, and 200% increase with the daily entries. So the next product I would like to talk about is called Boost Thyroid. It's also a tracker, and it's for people that have problems with thyroid. So they have Hashimoto disease, which is a disease that a lot of people have. It's millions of people. So they had the same problem, because we are still talking about trackers. So they needed more active users, and also they needed more data points. And in this case, the solution that we found was to hack basically a chatbot in order to drive retention and engagement. So here you can see the tracking for the app. So it's pretty similar to what Clue had. So we have an inline calendar on top and then some tracking options here, but just as a list. And that's the result of tracking. So after a person finishes to track, it's prompted to this chatbot overlay, where they actually get an insight strictly related to what they've been tracking. So now, how do we do qualitative research here? With a simple question. So what we did was asking people if the insight that we sent them was helpful. And according to their answer, we now know what kind of insights are good for them or not. So what kind of things respond to their needs or not. And this is very helpful. Another thing that we did, since we got carried away with the chatbot, was to use it to introduce new features. In this case, trends for report. And so we'll send a notification and then also have users come in the app and explain to them what a feature does. And also connected to that, having a button that was leading people to use the feature right away. So they had more context to understand what was going on. Since it's, in this case, also an early stage startup, we don't have numbers for this because the team is just developing it. But in terms of qualitative results, we had pretty nice results. So the team was awarded a European Seal of Excellence for the product. It was funded by PROBLEM, and it was also accepted in Fast Track Malmo Accelerator. The last use case I would like to talk about is Plantix. It's an AI-based app, Android app, that is used to detect diseases in plants and crops, and is mainly used in China, Brazil, and India. The problem that they had, as much as many other early-stage startups, was that they didn't have a full-time designer in their team. And that was a big problem because they couldn't translate their research into actual design. So what we did for them was to run an intensive workshop of 2 days and try to translate their huge knowledge gathered through research into an actual feature. Those are just some screens. So here you can see you can take a picture of a plant, in this case a tomato, to see what's going on there. And this is the team doing the workshop with us and translating their research into an actual feature and MVP cycles. So this is the kind of stuff that we did for them. We just helped them translating all the knowledge that they already had in something that was ready to be tested. So if I can leave you with anything tonight, I would like to stress that how important design is and how effective it is in terms of what it can do for you. And also talk a little bit about the sales aspect that I didn't touch on before. Those are just some few numbers, some random quotes that I pulled out from some surveys. This is from a book called Software Engineering that says that fixing a problem after development can be up to 100 times more expensive. So design and research prior to that can actually help you save a lot of money. That's the ROI, the return on investment of design is pretty high. This is a survey from Design Council, UK. And those are other 2 surveys, one from John Mieta and one from NEE, Designing Tech and Future of Design. So in 2017 alone, there were 21 acquisitions of design-centric and agencies, which is pretty impressive, I think. And also 63% of the more than 400 international startups said that they believe that design was a key component in their higher evaluation. Thank you very much. Happy to get your questions later on.
Yeah. Hey, hello.
Hi.
It was very nice sharing, thank you.
Sure.
And I had a question. So you mentioned that it was 1,000% cheaper to fix a problem before launch. But how can you know this design is like good enough?
Well,
like, to what point would you think it's good enough for launch?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Well, I think the example that I tried to make with Clue, with the onboarding, it's a good answer to that. Meaning, the more lo-fi testing you can do, the better, because it's really cheaper. So instead of like trying to get straight into design even, so research is even prior to design, and design can help you a little bit with that. And I think that can give you a lot of indications on how good you solve the problem. So I wouldn't also go straight into design either, like design something and testing the final design. I would first do some kind of, for example, interviews, surveys, field research, if possible, and then get more and more progressively into design. And I think you will see after some point, after 2, 3 different prototypes, that things are coming well together. And then if you are testing with, I don't know, at least like some tens of people, like 20, 30, 40 people, you get a clear indication if people get it or not. And I think that's the key.
Hi, how do you approach managing product managers, for example, who want to manipulate what you've tested? So, for example, you design something, you user test it, it comes out sunshine and rainbows and everybody loves it. Then it goes to build and it comes out either missing like features are manipulated, or things that you deem as crucial are missing because it was complex to build or something. And then something then comes out the other end and users don't find it very easy to use.
Are you a designer?
Actually, I'm head of design, so I look after UX and design, and brand.
Yeah, so, well, that's pretty common, actually. It's a good question.
Yeah.
I always struggle with that. I think the key to solve this problem is to actually involve stakeholders right away from the start. So what I was doing, I was basically taking PMs with me to do testing. So they were integrated from the start, and we were agreeing on certain things and also on the results, right? And so I had more leverage than to say, okay, we're not gonna change that because the results of the testing as you were there were this. So this is how it's gonna go out, right? But if you don't involve them, then it's pretty hard. So for example, if your designers or designer is actually going out and testing, and you know already who is the PM that is gonna be attached to the project, then they should go together probably. And maybe the PM could even take notes, actually.
What happens if the PM is not available? Like, what happens if one of the PM is like the CPO of the company?
Well, yeah, that's a good point. Well, I think that, so if you're really testing stuff first, right, before actually designing it, which is what I was suggesting and hinting to before. So the problem is, the real problem when this happens is when a designer goes already into design and tests something pretty final in terms of UI and usability, and then it's pretty pissed or shocked that it's not gonna happen like they envisioned it, right? For many reasons. Maybe there are different stakeholders that wanna, they wanna scope it down or whatever. But if you actually do it lo-fi and manage to gather like some insights and the basic skeleton of the feature, then you can go back and report to the PM that is supposed to actually work on that and discuss it and kind of agree on something. That's also something that I would suggest. It happened also to us that we weren't there with PMs to do the testing together. Yeah, I would try to integrate whomever is in charge of decisions later on in the process, so in this case the PM, to integrate them as soon as possible so that actually you can come to an agreement and not change the feature later on. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's a very idealistic situation. I'm not sure it always has to be it, but yeah.
Well, I mean, there is a lot of stuff that it's also about a human factor, right? So the personal relationship between people and how they collaborate, and I think whatever works, works. I mean, that's how I did it at Clue and other startups, but I don't know, maybe there are other ways, better ways.
Like in my experience, product managers tend to panic when they see things are converting or not, and then they, we'll just change this and see if it works, and blah, 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 and yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, it's also, I guess that problem is also has to do with ownership and sharing ownership, really. Not so much with testing, but like understanding and drawing in the sand, like when things are owned by multiple people. So not letting a designer go alone in the woods and come up with ideas and that's it. And same applies to PMs, right? So being able to be flexible and say, okay, there is a problem, we have data that shows this, and try also to understand what that data means, because most of the time, it happened also to us at Clue, for example. Most of the time we just looked at data and then we panicked, kind of thing. And then there was the instinct is always the one, okay, let's change everything because this is not working, right? Or let's change this thing that is not performing well. But you need to understand why. And to understand why, you need to test stuff, right? So, and that's why you need to include PMs at some point. So because they can see the other side of the spectrum, kind of thing.
I like to point about thanks for the talk. I like to point about
Thank you.
Being an egotistical designer.
Oh yeah. We all been there.
How hard was it for you to become less of an egotistical designer?
Well, when you see a feature fail that you are really confident about, yeah, that wakes you up, I think. Yeah. So yeah, it happens sometimes that you're really sure about certain things, and you're really sure there is a problem, and you have the data to support that, and you kind of know the solution, but then sometimes you don't have time to test stuff, right? So you just go on and do it, and then it doesn't work, and then it wakes you up, and I think that's really relevant, not just for designers, but for anyone, especially co-founders, I would say, or employees in an early stage of a startup, to understand that they are not the users. They are not the users. Like, we tend to think about people as users and persons are as personas, but actually in reality we don't know how they feel and what they think. So you need to understand that, and the easier way to do that is to ask them. So whenever we bypass that process and we think, okay, I have the perfect solution as a designer for this, I'm gonna design it like this and it's gonna be great, and then it doesn't work, then you wake up and realize that actually you might as well ask users. So what we did, for example, at Clue, was we had a huge beta tester pool. So we could always ask questions, we could always ask them to come in and test with us and do interviews with them and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes it happens that a feature doesn't go through, and then your ego is a bit slapped in the face.
Hi there.
Hi.
So I am the graphic designer and actually only designer at my company, and I've just been tasked with redoing our app, a desktop application, and our website. So I've limited UI.
2 weeks time?
Tomorrow. I have limited UI, UX experience aside from like university projects. Where would you recommend I start looking for either inspiration or like just starting the process in general, whether it be books you can recommend or anything else?
I like surveys more than books because they give me actual data and numbers to think about stuff. I don't know, if I were you, I would just pick, for example, companies that you really like, products that you really like, competitors and comparators, so someone that is doing something similar to what you need to do, but also something that just inspires you, and see which designer is working there and get in touch and ask them questions. That's what I would do. That's what I would do.
I have something to ask about that, because I was into, my name is Miguel, I work with this guy, by the way.
Hi, Miguel.
I was in the same position as you on the other side, in the sense that I was working at Soundcloud at the time, and there was a colleague of mine that was transitioning from graphic design to interaction design, right? And what she decided at the time was to find a mentor, and that pretty much solved everything, because you have someone you can ask every week to ask that person all your questions about how to do things, and she found that the process of doing that was better than have a bunch of links and stuff like that. And it's like being more personalized gives you a better kind of way of sucking information.
Mm-hmm.
Hope it helps.
Yeah.
Hi, I wondered, you said you had a huge beta tester base that you could tap in, and how did you manage to get that?
Well, I mean, if Mike was here, the CPO, the ex-CPO Clue, he will have a better way to reply to that. But yeah, I joined Clue when it was really early still, so there were only, I think, 4 people, 5, something like that. And so I saw the process in action a little bit. Because I was always running tests with Mike and talking to beta testers. So what we would do, for one, was to use customer support as well. So we will get emails, right, with questions about, for example, biology, or questions about the product. And then we will start conversations with these people. We spent tons of hours on Zendesk answering questions and talking to people, right? And some people were really engaged. And we asked them if they wanted to be beta testers, and a lot of them did. And for example, other times we went to Beta House and started testing prototypes or whatever, and then we will keep their email and ask them if they wanted to become beta testers. And in the end, after 1 year, 2 years of this, you get a pool of thousands of people. Sometimes also abroad, in other countries where the culture is really different, and it's really helpful because you need also to. It's pretty easy to design your own way, in your own way of culture or of thinking, right? So if you get beta testers are well distributed also in other cultures where, for example, sex and female health, it's seen from a totally different angle, then that works great.
Okay, well, I'm sure we can continue the conversation later, but thanks a lot, Lorenzo, for coming.
Thank you.
Good life,